You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Ambassador Razali, and to Nitin Desai, Undersecretary General for Policy Coordination and Sustainable Development, Ambassador Sardenberg, Ambassador Albright, distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to be here with you at an event of such importance to all of our countries and to countries whose representatives are not in this room as well. It is a year since the meeting at Rio. And while we usually focus on the ideas expressed during the official proceedings of the Earth Summit, I remember a lot more as well. The wonderful hospitality shown the world by Brazil. And I remember that the great riches of human creativity were on full display in Rio. That giant tree of life decorated with messages written by children on crayon on paper leaves from all over the world. Representatives of indigenous peoples like the Kayapo and the Yanomami, the Inuit and Pinan, presenting impassioned defenses of the endangered remnants of wilderness within which their ancient cultures are still struggling to survive. Scientists there displayed startlingly beautiful computer images of every square inch of the Earth as seen from space. Artists crafted spectacular sculptures, paintings, music, graphics, and films. And they all seemed more alike than different. The indigenous person and the artist, the scientist and the child, the tourist and the diplomat. All seemed to share a deeper understanding, a recognition that we are all part of something larger than ourselves, a family related only distantly by blood, but intimately by commitment to each other's common future. And so it is today. We gather here from different parts of the globe. My words even now are being translated into many different languages. Over the next few days, we will need to resolve some significant differences. But we are united by a common premise, that human activities are needlessly causing grave and perhaps irreparable damage to the global environment, and we must respond. The dangers are clear to all of us. The Earth's forests are being destroyed at the rate of one football field's worth every second. An enormous hole has been opening in the ozone layer each year, reducing the Earth's ability to protect life from deadly ultraviolet radiation. Living species now die at such an unprecedented rate that, according to some scientists, if this tragedy continues, more than half of all the creatures God put on this planet may disappear within the lifetimes of people now living. More and more chemical poisons seep down to poison groundwater and upward into the atmosphere to destroy its delicate balance. Degradation of land, forests, and fresh water, individually and synergistically, play critical roles in international instability. Huge quantities of carbon dioxide, methane, and other greenhouse gases dumped into the atmosphere trap heat and raise global temperatures. You know this. Our shared sense of urgency has brought us here today. Would that everyone saw things the same way. They don't. A few weeks ago, Harvard professor Edward Wilson, writing in the New York Times, summarized the notions of those who have a different view. And I quote, "Population growth, good for the economy, so let it run. Land shortages, try fusion energy to power the desalting of seawater, then reclaim the world's deserts by towing icebergs to coastal pipelines. Species going extinct? Not to worry," these skeptics say. "That's nature's way. Think of humankind as only the latest in a long line of exterminating agents in geological time. Resources? This planet has more than enough resources to last indefinitely." You've heard these views. Wilson called this group the exemptionalists because they hold that humans are so transcendent in intelligence and spirit that we have somehow been exempted from the iron laws of ecology that bind other species. Well, the human race is not exempt from the laws of ecology. Those laws bind us too. And we made a commitment at Rio, at the Earth Summit, to change our course. We made a commitment to reject the counsel of those who would continue along the road to extermination. And if there was any doubt about the support of the United States for that commitment, let me lay it to rest right here and now. This administration not only supports that commitment, we intend to join with all those determined to demonstrate real leadership. Don't take my word for it. Listen to the words of President Clinton commemorating Earth Day, and I quote, "Unless we act, and act now," he said, "we face a future where our planet will be home to 9 billion people, but its capacity to support and sustain our lives will be very much diminished. Unless we act, we face the extinction of untold numbers of species that might save our very lives. Unless we act now, we face a future in which the sun may scorch us, not warm us, and where our children's children will inherit a planet far less hospitable than the world in which we came of age." President Clinton mentioned the critical importance of the biodiversity treaty emerging from Rio and announced that the United States would now sign that treaty, and so we did on June 4th. He mentioned the importance of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and committed the United States to reducing emissions to 1990 levels by the year 2000, a major change for my country. The President also announced a series of executive orders that will transform our government into a leader in pollution prevention and energy efficiency. For if we ask for changes in everyone else's house, shouldn't we get our own house, the federal government of the United States, in order? And this afternoon, I am pleased to tell you, we will announce one of the many fruits of this new attention to the environment from the United States, the formation of the President's Council on Sustainable Development. This 25-member council, announced later today, will build a new partnership among representatives from industry, government, and environmental groups. It will develop new approaches to integrating economic and environmental policies in the United States. The President will formally establish the Council in a ceremony at the White House this afternoon. By the end of this year, this Council will have contributed to the U.S. Sustainable Development Action Plan. That plan will then be reported to you. We believe in this mission. We are committed to making it work. But of course, what we have done so far is only a beginning. We cannot overestimate the difficulties that lie ahead. In fact, from the vast array of problems about which it is possible to be pessimistic, let me mention two. First, population growth. It is sobering to realize what is happening to the world's population in the course of our lifetimes. From the beginning of the human species until the end of World War II in this century, when I was born and when some of you were born, over that period of time, it took more than 10,000 generations to reach a world population of a little more than 2 billion people. But in just the past 45 years, that population has gone from a little over 2 billion to over 5.5 billion. And if I live another 45 years, it will be 9 or 10 billion. If it takes 10,000 generations to reach 2 billion, and then only a single human lifetime to go from 2 billion to almost 10 billion, surely that is abundant evidence that something profoundly different is taking place in the relationship between our species and the Earth's ecological system, and it is taking place right now. The changes brought about by this explosion are not for the distant future. This is not only a problem for our grandchildren. The problems are already here. Soil erosion, the loss of vegetative cover, extinction, desertification, famine, the garbage and waste crisis, the population explosion, accompanied by wholesale changes in technology, affects every aspect of our lives in every part of the globe. Now, sometimes developing countries feel the population argument is one made by wealthy countries who want to clamp down on the ability of developing countries to grow. Let me answer that. Sometimes the developing countries are right. So I say this to citizens of the developed nations. We have a disproportionate impact on the global environment. We have less than a quarter of the world's population, but we use 3/4 of the world's raw materials and create 3/4 of all solid waste. One way to put it is this: a child born in the United States will have during his or her lifetime 30 times as much of an impact on the Earth's environment than a child born in India. The affluent of the world have a responsibility to deal with their disproportionate impact. But population growth affects everyone. By the year 2000, 31 low-income countries will be unable to feed their people using their own land. At the second preparatory committee meeting for the International Conference on Population and Development, the United States pledged its commitment to help promote international consensus around the globe for stabilizing world population growth. And in fact, on President Clinton's first full day in office, he announced the change in the so-called Mexico City policy. We called at the preparatory meeting for a comprehensive approach built around 3 areas: the environment, development, and the rights and needs of women. Is population growth only a problem of birth control? Of course not. Paradoxically, reducing infant mortality is important as well. Several decades ago, Julius Nyeri put this matter cogently when he said, "The most powerful contraceptive in the world is the confidence by parents that their children will survive." More recently, a doctor in India put the matter in a slightly different way as he explained the dramatic success of programs in Kerala that have dramatically reduced birth rates, and said the most enduring contraception is female education. He said women realize they have a conscious choice and that hopes and dreams for their children are not unrealistic. Slowing population growth is in the deepest self-interest of all governments. It is a responsibility for rich and poor countries alike. But rapid population growth is only one of the causes of a profound transformation in the relationship between human civilization and the ecological system of the Earth. The emergence of extremely powerful new technologies which can magnify the impact each of us can have on the global environment has also played an important role. Just as the emergence of nuclear weapons transformed the consequences of the age-old habit of warfare, so the emergence of thousands of powerful technologies for exploiting the Earth for sustenance have cumulatively magnified the consequences of age-old patterns of exploiting the Earth. Most significant of all, many people now think about our relationship to the Earth in ways that seem to assume that we don't have to concern ourselves with the consequences of our actions, as if the global environment will somehow forever be impervious to the rapidly mounting insults to its integrity and balance. But the evidence of deterioration is all around us. Take, for example, the threat to our supply of fresh water. There is a lot of water on Earth, but not a lot of it is fresh water. Only about 2.5% of the water on this planet is fresh, and most of that is locked away as ice in Antarctica and Greenland and in other areas. Furthermore, much of that water is used very inefficiently. It also may be polluted by toxics and human waste. Meanwhile, by the year 2000, 18 of the 22 largest metropolitan areas in the world, I speak of those with more than 10 million people each, 18 of these cities will be in developing countries. By 2025, 60% of the world's population will live in cities. That's more than 5 billion people living in cities, and they will all urgently need fresh water and water sanitation. Not just to drink, water affects industrial development as well. It is a medium necessary for heat exchange, processing, and transport. It affects the world's ability to produce food. 76% of global water use, after all, is agricultural. A significant change in the availability of fresh water supply can trigger massive human migrations. Because we know how precious drinkable water is, our ways of supplying it have become justly celebrated as triumphs of human ingenuity. Whether the first irrigation networks along the Nile or the monumental system of tunnels that bring water to this city so we could brush our teeth in the hotel rooms this morning. We will need all our ingenuity to prevent that supply from drying up. Rapid growth itself is a threat to our supply of fresh water, whether in Mexico City, where the water level of the main aquifer drops as much as 11 feet every year, or in any of the approximately 80 countries which already suffer from serious freshwater shortages. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization estimates that contaminated water causes at least 25 million deaths in developing nations every single year. Hundreds of millions more suffer from debilitating waterborne diseases. In fact, about 80% of all diseases and over 1/3 of all deaths in developing countries are caused by the consumption of contaminated water. More than 3 million infants die each year from diarrhea alone due to contaminated drinking water and inadequate sanitation. What is the reason for the great popular indifference to these crises? Where is the world's outrage? Where is the urgency to respond dramatically and effectively? I sometimes like to cite the old science experiment involving a frog. Put the frog into a pot of boiling water and it jumps right out because it recognizes the danger. But put the same frog into a pot of lukewarm water and bring it slowly to a boil, and the frog will just sit there until it's rescued. I've learned over the years of telling that story, it's important to rescue the frog in the middle of the story. But the point of the story is that the frog's nervous system is so simple, it needs a sudden contrast to get the message and make the connection between its danger and its salvation. When the process of change is gradual, the frog is lulled into a false sense of security. We are like that frog. When the change seems gradual, we have trouble recognizing it. From day to day, the lives of most of us seem not to change all that much. It is only when we lift our gaze beyond the next few days or years that we see the truth. Similarly, even though our worldwide civilization confronts an unprecedented global environmental crisis, we can go from day to day without confronting the rapid change now underway. We must recognize the extent to which we are damaging the global environment, and we must develop new ways to work together to foster economic progress without environmental destruction. Must we forever react to emergencies as they develop? Shouldn't we begin now with the work of this commission to prevent future Somalias, future Haitis, future crises around the world? The United Nations is the place where the world must decide on a strategy to build for the future, not simply watch the resources of the United Nations strained as more and more emergencies cry out for our attention. How do we do it? Well, first let me dispose of a few myths. No matter what this commission does, it cannot do everything by itself. Archimedes said if he had the right lever and a firm place to stand, he could move the world. This commission should seek to exert leverage on other institutions which can help us accomplish our task. Second, the industrial countries do not have a monopoly on ideas. In fact, last year at Rio, many developing countries showed the way. Third, we must once and for all abandon the idea that economic development and environmental responsibility are incompatible. Economic development is no excuse for environmental vandalism. Rich countries cannot impose limits on poor countries or deny them the right to achieve wealth. At the same time, there is increasing recognition that the fastest growing markets in the world are in developing countries, countries where the demand for environmentally responsible technologies is also growing rapidly. Economic progress without environmental destruction. That's what sustainable development is all about. Two principles must guide us as we set about the pursuit of sustainable development. First, the principle of national responsibility. After all, the role of this commission is primarily catalytic. It can focus attention on issues of common interest. It can serve as a forum for raising ideas and making plans. It can help resolve issues that arise as nations proceed in their sustainable development agendas. It can monitor progress. It can help shift the multilateral financial institutions and bilateral assistance efforts toward a sustainable development agenda. It can help revitalize the United Nations system to ensure that sustainable development is a central theme in each organization. Indeed, this commission, through its focus on sustainable development, can enhance United Nations efforts to maintain peace, stability, and prosperity in this post-Cold War world. But it can do none of these things unless each individual country makes a strong commitment to change in its own policies. This commission will simply be a meeting about meetings if the members fail to bring to the table a strong sense of national responsibility. Will the United States show that sense of commitment? We can and we will. That's why I'm here today. That's why we will announce a plan to move forward on climate change by August, a detailed outline for action that will continue the trend of reduced emissions past the next 7 years. That's why we've established a national biological survey to protect our own biodiversity. That's why we're moving immediately to reduce toxic releases involved in activities of our federal government. That's why we're buying energy-efficient technologies, including alternative fuel vehicles for federal fleets. That's why we will soon announce a new management plan for the forests in our own country. That's why President Clinton, as I mentioned before, in his very first day in office, changed the Mexico City policy and acted to promote access to the full range of qualitative reproductive care for women everywhere. And that's just the start. But just as each nation must assume national responsibility, so must we all act together. If sustainable development is to become a reality, the second principle we must follow is that of partnership. There are still those who think that wealthy countries on this planet have a monopoly on technology and insight. We all know that's nonsense. We can learn from each other. That's why this commission must encourage partnership among nations, especially a partnership between the North and the South. Over the last 20 years, we have made some progress in creating the basis for a true global partnership. UNCED was a landmark in unifying environment and development in the term sustainable development. And now this insight must be given life within the policies of every government, trade, commerce, agriculture, every policy of every government. All interests need to be a part of the effort, and that's why this commission as well must help create partnerships within countries. There are those who expect us to rely on a single financial mechanism, such as the GEF for Agenda 21 implementation. But Agenda 21 addresses much too broad a range of issues for the GEF. That's why this commission must create partnerships between it and all multilateral development banks. All of them have to be involved. Finally, there are those who believe that only government can marshal the resources necessary for this task. That's not true. Public policy that gets input from everyone is better public policy. The fact is, the private sector played a huge role in Rio, and if this commission is to succeed, it must help create partnerships between government and non-governmental organizations. National responsibility, partnership. Can we actually translate these ideas, the staple of political rhetoric, into an enduring reality? I don't blame those who are pessimistic. In fact, a few months ago, I was going through the solutions for our environmental crisis with a group of scientists, and at the end, one of them raised his hand and said, "You know, I agree with everything you've said, but I know enough about politics and about the United Nations to tell you that it's not likely to occur. The momentum towards continuing our current way of doing things is just too powerful." We all know there's something to that. But what would our reaction have been 4 or 5 years ago if someone had said that in the next several months all of the communist countries in Eastern Europe would suddenly become democracies and choose market economics? What if we had said that all of the statues of Lenin would be torn down and that we would have a chance to remake the world in the aftermath of the Cold War? What if we had said that Nelson Mandela would be free and F.W. de Klerk would announce the end of apartheid and that together they would set out on the tortuous road to reconciliation in South Africa? None of these events would have seemed likely or even plausible. We can assume change is impossible, or we can be a part of the solution and make change inevitable. We can assume our enemies are too powerful, or we can assume the urgency of our mission is more powerful. I believe there is every reason for hope, and part of the reason is this group from every part of this planet committed to the idea of sustainable development. It's not the only reason, for there are millions and millions in every part of our world who believe as we do. Some are working in governments, attending meetings like this one, but there are countless others whose work goes uncelebrated and unrecognized. A woman in Kenya's Greenbelt movement plants a tree and then organizes a meeting about family planning. An engineer in Detroit comes up with a way to use less fuel. A scientist in Antarctica drilling through the ice finds clues to the history of our planet. A teacher in Brazil leads a class full of children in a discussion about the rainforest. These are the men and women who give us hope. They care. They are committed. They are looking to us, to this commission. In the next few days, as we plan the future of this commission, let us remember the spirit animating our meeting thousands of miles to the south exactly 1 year ago. Remember how we achieved unity of purpose out of diversity. And let that memory of past success give us the will to succeed in the future and to succeed for our common future. Thank you very much.